Hi, I'm Citizen Voice President Gary Dietrich, and we have a treat for you today, my friends, with an answer to the most asked question in California this fall. How in the heck did we get 17 ballot measures? How did we get there? And if you don't like that, how do we get out of that mess? Well, joining me today to help break this all down is former Assemblymember Roger Nilo and former Assemblymember Lloyd Levine. And one Republican, one Democrat. Got to keep this even, Stephen. But I really want to help you understand where we are, how we got there, and if you think we ought to, and many people do, how do we get out of this mess? So, gentlemen, let's start with that. Roger, let's start with you. How did we get to 17 ballot measures this fall in 2016?
Well, it's because 16 weren't enough and 18 were too many.
Okay, well, many people think 17 are too darn many, so how did we get here?
Well, first of all, it isn't unprecedented. There have been previous ballots with lots of initiatives on them, but this one could have been paced out a little bit more. We had one in June, 17 now. We could have had more in June and fewer in November, and that was forced by a legislative action in 2011, I think. SB 202, I believe, was the bill number that stated that any initiatives that qualified after, I think it was 2012, would all be on the general election ballot.
Which is November.
Which is
Right.
November. But for those that were put on the ballot by the legislature, which could be in June, and that was the one measure in June.
Okay, and then why did they do it? Lloyd,
Well, hold on.
Yeah,
There's a second reason. I don't disagree with Roger. He's absolutely right. But there's also a second reason. And in order to qualify for an initiative, except coming from the legislature, it's a signature process. Signatures on petitions. We've all seen the people standing outside the grocery store asking you to sign the petitions. The number of signatures required is dependent upon the turnout for the last gubernatorial election. 2 years ago, we had the lowest turnout in history for the November election for governor, so the threshold to qualify was much lower. So it was much cheaper, you needed fewer signatures, less work, so it became easier to qualify things. And then you factor that in to make everything on the November ballot, you got a double whammy.
Got it. Tell us a little bit about the politics, though, Roger. I mean, why was this bill passed to move everything to November?
Well, that the bill that moved everything to November also moved a budget management bill that was written by Assemblyman Gatto, actually back in 2010. It kept on being moved back. Eventually, there was another deal which we passed in 2014. Additionally, there were issues that were brewing at the time, and there were people that wanted those issues to go on a ballot where there'd be more voters as a ballot where there'd be fewer voters.
Because they thought the more voters would benefit their cause.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind for the general public, which we're here to inform people. We're not really here to advocate, but to inform.
Right.
And no two elections are alike, and the turnout is higher in November, and people argue, and you could look at statistically, this is true, it is more reflective of the general overall population and opinion of the state of California. In June elections, primary for governor, that turnout goes down and it skews. Now, there's pluses and minuses to all of that. That's up for debate as to what we should do, but the facts of which election or which, that impacts the turnout and then the resulting vote.
Right, but to be fair about it, I mean, really, the politics behind this were such that people wanted a certain ballot measure on a November ballot because they thought it would be either better for their side. That's the bottom line.
That's it, yes.
Okay.
The issue was a more liberal-leaning issue, and the June ballot ends up with more conservative voters.
There you go.
So there were definitely politics involved.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Now,
I don't disagree with him. He's correct on that.
there you go. So, some people say this is just too darn much. I mean, even if we've had it in the past, especially in a presidential year, and they've got congressional races, they got legislative races, and they get this thing in the mail, and now it's 224 pages here for the statewide ballot pamphlet, and people are like, come on, really? I'm not taking a graduate level course. So if people wanted to change this back, if they said, listen, we want to have some stuff to vote on in June and stuff in November, how would we get back to that place?
Well, one change could be to allow more issues to be on the primary, on the June ballot, and even it out between June and November. As I said, it's not unprecedented to have this many initiatives. It can happen anyway.
Right.
And
but how would we get back there? How could we get back to having some in June that were, that people signed signatures and got on the ballot?
That would be reversing that policy that was passed a few years ago that shoved everything to the November ballot. And the legislature would have to do that. People would have to talk to their legislator and try to get that changed legislation.
But that wouldn't necessarily be a cure-all, because in preparing for this interview, I did a little bit of research, and I found that, going back to not that long ago, 1988, there were actually 29 measures on the primary ballot in '88. You go to the year 2000, there were 20 measures on the primary ballot, and then in 2004, there was 16 measures on the general election ballot. So this isn't unprecedented, and simply moving to a primary doesn't necessarily cure everything, but obviously just mathematically, if you spread these propositions out over 2 elections, the chances are that this is not going to happen as frequently.
Right, and we don't want to see 30 out there, do we, at some point in time?
Well, it's funny you say that. The most we've ever had was in 1914, there were 48.
I dare say that if we get 48 measures on the ballot, we'd have to have mules taking these things around door to door to drop them off, because the stack of papers would be like Reagan with the tax bill. Putting
I want the printing contract.
Yeah, that's exactly right, my friend. There you go. Well, listen, friends, you've heard it here first. I mean, we got into this through some kind of politics, but here we are. It could be changed, but regardless of whether it is or isn't, here's one thing you can count on. Citizen Voice is going to be around to help you sort all this out. So remember, we're going to have resources for you right here on this page from our partner organizations and a lot of others to help you get the information you need to decide this time around. And these 2 gentlemen and I will be spending a full 2 hours on the radio breaking it all down. We'll have a link for you here on that too, to do all we can to help you, both now, 2018, 2020, and beyond, make the best decisions we can for the state of California. Make sure you get registered and vote.